Welcome to America Decides. Historic day here in Washington. Former President Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty to all charges in the January 6th special counsel case. He faced a judge in federal court here in Washington under tight security. His first hearing has been set for August 28th, 2023. The former president has denied any wrongdoing. The 4 counts include conspiracy to defraud the United States following the 2020 election. The former president criticized the case shortly after his arraignment.
When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers.
For more on this, let's bring in the best of the best. Scott MacFarlane, Major Garrett and Fin Gómez join us all now. Scott is CBS News congressional correspondent. Major is CBS News chief Washington correspondent. And Fin is CBS News political director. Scott and Major, I want to start with you. I know, Scott, you were inside the courtroom earlier today and got to see everything that cameras can't because they're not allowed in there. Major, I know you've been reporting from outside the courthouse and have covered Donald Trump for so long. I'm wondering what you two make of what you saw today. A history-making day, and yet we've been through this before.
Well, one thing I want to say, Caitlin, is one of the reasons that CBS News has so carefully covered and so accurately covered all the events that have transpired from January 6th in legal matters, because Scott MacFarlane has been there every step of the way. This courthouse you see behind us is not just any courthouse. It is the courthouse, the central place in which justice has been served and justice has been tested about what did or didn't happen on January 6th, and were there actual criminal acts committed there. Scott has covered that extensively. Scott, this is the culmination of all those other underlying prosecutions, is it not?
One of the police officers who responded that day, Major, called it a cathartic day. Seeing somebody besides one of the rioters walk into this courtroom meant something to the victims. Not speaking to guilt or innocence here, but just seeing somebody else besides those who carried the nightsticks, the pepper spray, the knives, and the, in some cases, guns, January 6th, be held to account and charged with a crime. There's something, though, that's distinctive to me as the day ends. Just feels like it was an invisible day to America. I had the privilege of being inside and saw Donald Trump, his mannerisms, his body language, the way he surveyed the room, the way he stood shoulders back when he said not guilty. America didn't get to see that.
No.
And the reality is sinking in, I think, for some people. For this case, this historic case, this case about overturning the 2020 election, it's going to be invisible.
Invisible in a sense, but also highly visible, Caitlin, because unlike the documents case, unlike the Manhattan case, this one and its underlying causality played out on live television on January 6th. It is a traumatic moment that everyone in America witnessed. They saw what happened. They saw a crowd storm the steps of the Capitol just right over there. One of the interesting geographic realities of this is this proceeding and all that will flow through it here will be right adjacent to where the crime was committed. And clearly the prosecutorial record established in this courtroom with other defendants is that it was a crime. Crimes were committed.
Donald Trump is about to face the prospect of trial in the District of Columbia, where juries have convicted 100% of the January 6th defendants who've sought a trial by jury, at least partially, including on charges like seditious conspiracy and theft or violence against police. And they certainly have convicted a number of defendants on the very charge Trump faces: obstruction of an official proceeding, and that other charge, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. The prosecutors have practiced at this. The judges have practiced looking at this. They've handled dozens of these cases. This is a very different venue than the one in Miami.
It's a different venue. It's a different set of facts. And it's a different political reality, Caitlin. And I know you have questions for Fin about the politics around this. And I will tell you that I'm not sure the politics of this will wear the same way the politics of the Manhattan indictment or even the Mar-a-Lago indictment went. Yes, there are plenty of Trump supporters who believe there was something wrong with the election, but do they fundamentally believe that the only remedy was to engage in what the special counsel alleges was a by-choice conspiracy to thwart the will of the American people? Was that the only remedy? I'm not sure the politics of that have been thoroughly tested. They're going to be tested as an evidentiary matter in this courtroom.
Yeah, Major, that's a really important point here because we have, as you note, the physical significance of this courtroom and proximity to the Capitol, where the president takes the oath of office on January 20th each time. You know, this is a former president, who is running for this same office again, Finn, as the front runner, at least at this point, for the Republican nomination. You've been talking to the campaign and sources close to Trump all day. They see this, it seems, as a political benefit. But what are you hearing at this point in time?
One thing I would just want to state that I will always defer to Major Garrett on politics, FYI. But two, I think it's interesting that I was in Iowa last week and speaking to Republican primary, these caucus goers, right? These potential caucus goers there, and asking them specifically about this case. And, the feedback I got was that it doesn't matter to them. To them, they toe the line. They sound like Trump, frankly, when they respond about this. That it's a witch hunt. It's a politically calculated move by the Biden administration to essentially kneecap the former president. You heard Trump on the tarmac just now saying that it's a persecution, that he's beating Biden by a lot. He's not, frankly, but it's not registering within the parameters of the Republican primary race, and I think that point benefits Trump, and I don't foresee that changing anytime soon either.
Yeah, and especially if the rival campaigns aren't really doing much to change that either.
Right.
Coming to his defense in times like this and, telling us, according to our reporting, that they don't see an appetite right now among the Republican Party base to talk about this. The politics of the moment aside here, I mean, Major and Scott, we do have a long way to go until voters start weighing in Iowa. But you both having covered this so closely, the idea, Scott, to your point about, finally kind of seeing at least some kind of preliminary consequence for the president, I'm wondering kind of what kind of impact that has.
The timing feels so important. The consequence is kind of tied to the timing. We're not doing this in a vacuum. Less than 6 months till the caucuses. We're going to be, I suppose, less than a year and a half now from the general election. And the timing becomes critical. How close can these court dates get to those primary elections, to a possible general election? And not only that, what impact do these court dates have on the Republican primary voters themselves? Is it a shot of adrenaline for Trump? But there's also 3 cases on the same track at the same time.
And just so you know, Caitlin, we have unexpectedly won the Bullhorn Lottery, if ever so briefly.
We've won it before.
Perfect timing for a live shot.
We've won it again.
Yeah, so that was one of the members of the larger gallery around here at the federal courthouse. I will say, all day long, I've been here since about 11 o'clock this morning. Very civil, very small number of folks. A couple of bullhorns. There hadn't been one about 2 hours. That's why I made that semi-comedic reference to winning the Bullhorn Lottery. The bullhorn's since been quieted, and the person has moved along. But to Scott's point, and he was in the courtroom and he saw some of the interactions, the Trump defense team made an immediate request for more time. What is your sense, based on what you observed, whether that time will be granted and whether the judge who will receive this case will be open to a persistent appeal for delays from the Trump defense team?
Choice was given to the Trump defense team between 3 dates for the next hearing, August 21st, August 22nd, or August 28th, and they very promptly said August 28th. And then they advised the judge, the magistrate judge, that they may need more time after that because of the tonnage of evidence in this case. But a lot of this falls into the hands of somebody who wasn't in the room today. The U.S. District Court judge who gets this case is Tanya Chutkan, a 2014 appointee of then-President Obama. She has already had a relatively, by D.C. standards, famous ruling against the former president when he challenged the handover of White House records to the House Select January 6th committee. It went to Judge Chutkan's court, and she ruled against him and sped up the handover of records in a time-sensitive matter for that committee. So This is an indication potentially of a judge who doesn't want to see unnecessary delays or delays with which she disagrees.
And in this case, Scott, it's been my assessment, and lawyers I've talked to about this, that facts are not in dispute. Much of this is part of the record of the Trump presidency. So it's not as if it's hard to find, not as if he's unfamiliar with it, not as if he needs to be read in or his attorneys need to be read in on a great deal of this. So from a just process point of view, this judge may say, yes, you have rights as a defendant. I will honor those rights, but you cannot play them out endlessly and delay this court endlessly.
I'll tell you something about this judge. Having sat in her courtroom for dozens of hearings, she often goes on a soliloquy about the history, the rich history of the District of Columbia. She loves to talk about the history of Washington, D.C. She argues it was never built on a swamp, that it's a beautiful city and a wonderful city. I wonder how she's going to receive the inevitable change of venue motions in which defense attorneys ascribe some motives to the D.C. jury pool. And it's not lost on me, Donald Trump, during his remarks tonight, blasted the aesthetics and the culture of the District of Columbia.
Incorrectly, by the way, incorrectly. And that request for a venue change, we listened during the special report coverage to Scott Frederickson, a very experienced federal prosecutor, so that has a near zero probability of being granted because jurisdiction matters very greatly to federal courts. It matters to state courts, but they're sometimes a bit more flexible about that. Jurisdiction matters enormously in federal courts. The jurisdiction in which the crimes alleged occurred is here, to place that federal rules and judicial procedures recommend cases be adjudicated or where the crime was committed.
Right, and so underscoring the idea that this is kind of a political push as well, the idea, Finn, that Donald Trump didn't have to appear in person today. As Scott and Major have pointed out throughout the day, he could have easily appeared virtually. What does it say that he wanted to come here to Washington, a place that he derided in those public remarks that he made, to show face?
I think it's exactly that, to show face. You keep hearing from his senior advisors and from him about his mindset right now. And the key word you keep hearing is defiance. He's defiant. And I think by showing up and being defiant in his words and what he said on that tarmac, I think it's a bullhorn, to borrow Major's word there, to his supporters. It's just to say, like, you know, and by the way, I referenced a CNN poll earlier. That same CNN poll came out today showing that Republican voters believe that there was election fraud, that the percentage of Republican voters who believe there's election fraud related to the 2020 election has increased from 63%, it was something close to 70%, which is just shocking to a lot of people along the political landscape. But again, I mean, I think this is a clear sign to his supporters that he's being defiant. And tomorrow, by the way, he's having a rally in Alabama. Not a rally, excuse me. He's going to be speaking to the GOP at a GOP dinner in Montgomery, Alabama. And if you compare that to D.C., that is a much more friendlier audience than Washington,
And
D.C.
we'll see him with a familiar route going to one of his properties tonight after this arraignment. Fin Gómez, Scott MacFarlane, and Major Garrett, great to have you all with us. Thank you for your reporting today and every day.